Well, it's time to turn the compost again. We've got an average temperature of 170 degrees Fahrenheit across all three of our temperature probes. So here we go. Turn number 4. I use this really sturdy cage. Just hooked in the extra wire to make the clasp. Sometimes it's hard to find these things. Now we've got the new cage assembled on the platform. We're going to start removing some layers. First, I'm going to take off the top part. Keep it together. Comes all the steam. I'm going to break this up. Bring some oxygen back into the pile. Keep everything on the tarp with the top here. Steaming. So this pile is going to have a hot center, hotter than the rest of the pile. I'm going to scrape off the top of this and then take a little bit of the edges of the top, which will leave me the core of my hot center. And then I'll take that hot center and I'll put it on the bottom of the new cage. So just working my way down. goal is to make sure all the material reaches the hot center and gets hot enough for long enough, which this pile is having no trouble at doing. I used a high nitrogen source of spent grains that I collected from the local brewery, Yellowhammer. Which is fueling all this microbial activity in the pile. Also got a lot of grass that I cut from the yard and the back side of the woods here. Which I'm using for my greens, obviously. The greens will help sustain the microbial activity, especially the bacteria. It's bacterial food. My brown component. Found a nice old man that had a ton of wood chips that had been sitting around for a while. So I used about 19 buckets of wood chips. Also collected leaves last fall. So the key here being we've got 3 different starting materials: woody, green, and high nitrogen. And we want a mix of different sizes of material. We don't want this to compact down and lose its oxygen flow through the pile. So building structure with different size starting materials is key. Pretty good moisture going on. Do a little squeeze test here to see where we're at. Still has quite a bit of moisture. Got a little sponginess to it. We'll go ahead and add just a little bit of moisture here. Let the pile dry out too much, microorganisms stop functioning. You gotta keep that balance. I want to keep it somewhere around 50%, 50, 60 at the most percent moisture in the pile. You get it too wet, you're gonna block all those air passageways, cause anaerobic conditions. The balance is key here. So right now we've got most of the top scooped off. Take a little bit from the edges here. Keep everything on the pile. Breaking it all up as it goes. Also for my green starting materials, I collected some coffee grounds from Starbucks and just go in there and ask them to save them for you throughout the day. Usually they're more than grateful to give them to you. And then these green plants you see right here, were all covering this area, so I took all of that out and I stripped the leaves off and added those for part of my green starting materials as well. So this pile reached an average high of 170, which means I needed to turn the pile immediately. The heat generation kills all the pathogens, any weed seeds, and any pests that might be present, while sustaining the beneficial microorganisms. So once you get too hot, you start killing off your beneficials. So it's key to pay attention to your temperature rises throughout the day. Sometimes even in the middle of the night, you gotta come and take a look. So that's my top. Now I'm gonna take my next section here and I'm gonna put it in the bottom of the cage. So this is gonna be our hot center going on the bottom. Again, just trying to break it up as we transfer it to its new spot. Get all that oxygen back in there. Steaming now. Do a little squeeze test, see where we're at on our moisture content. Super hot. You can hear the sponginess, it's sticking together pretty good. Super hot. Add a little moisture here. Always good to add a little moisture now. Pile's been heating up for, what are we going on? Almost a week now. Tomorrow will be a week since I built the pile. Everything started out pretty wet. Didn't have to do much hydration of the starting materials because they were all naturally hydrated. We've also had a little bit of humidity, a little bit of rain, which has helped maintain the moisture in the pile, but obviously with these hot temperatures, you're gonna get some moisture loss, so gotta do a check every once in a while and see where you're at. Make sure you keep those microbes happy. Definitely a challenge trying to keep all the materials on the top of the pile here, so I'm trying to scrape them towards the middle best I can. So per the Soil Food Web standards, you need to have 3 heating cycles followed by 3 turns. This ensures everything in your pile makes it to your hot center. Gives it a chance to reoxygenate after the final heating cycle. Now for organic standards, USDA, you have to do 5 turns, which means 5 heating cycles. So in order to accomplish this, you got to boost up your high nitrogen. So far this pile looks like it's going to meet those USDA standards for organic. So this will be a good recipe for me to put into my logbook to be able to reference later. Obviously, your starting materials are going to be a little bit different each time. Also, your conditions where you're composting are going to be a little bit different in each place that you compost. Obviously, the weather is constantly changing, so it's all about adapting, using what you got around you. I'm just going to pull these materials towards the edge of my cage. Make a little flat bottom to keep throwing this hot center on. Still digging out of the middle here. Trying to pull all the sides in. Once I dig the middle out, helps maintain it on top. Do a little moisture check here. See where we're at. Still pretty spongy, sticking together pretty good. A bunch of leaf matter. But definitely need a little moisture in there. A bit of a cloudy day here in Alabama, about 70 degrees. About 9 in the morning right now. When selecting your wood chips, you want to find some that are aged, meaning they've been sitting out for a number of months. Especially if you're using certain tree species, like pine for instance. Pine has antimicrobial properties that you need to let volatilize before you add them to your compost. So it's best if you dry those chips out first and then bury them under some native soil to help inoculate the local mycelium. You and just let them sit there. Let them sit there for as long as you need until you're ready to use them. You start breaking down, that's all right. The fungi are gonna love it. All in all, I didn't spend any money on these starting materials. Either collected them from the yard here or just asked these folks with these businesses if they had any they were willing to get rid of. Most of the time, these places are having to pay to dump their materials, or they're just giving them away to farmers. So usually they've got a little bit to spare. But along the way, I'm just building relationships with these people. Once I start doing some larger scale composting, there'll be good resources to team up with, so we can direct those resources to composting facility. So I didn't use anything in here that would attract animals, but if your high nitrogen sources, typically you'd use manure. Some manures get pretty stinky and you might get some unwanted visitors. Plus you might upset the neighbors. They found these spent grains to be the least stinky, but they are lacking in some of the microbial population that we're thriving for. So it's always good to add some inoculum from an older compost pile that you might have. Also, diversity is key on all your starting materials. However, this is a class project and they asked for us to use just one high nitrogen starting material, just so we could understand how it's going to operate in our recipe and in our environment. So going forward, I'll end up throwing in some sort of a manure with the spent grains. And the spent grains will really just keep that pile cooking a bit longer. It's much hotter than the manures. As I'm going, I'm taking note of how much moisture I think is in there. Squeeze test here and there. Get a feel for the sponginess. See, things are drying out. Definitely need to add moisture, but this pile's doing pretty good. I just want to make sure I'm adding some as I go, because it's a lot harder to get water in there once you built the pile. So we're getting close. We've got maybe another layer or so of this hot center that we're going to add to the pile. We're just continuing to move these materials to the edge of the cage. So in the browns, I also used some junk mail. I shredded it up, added it in. Made sure to remove any plastic pieces that might have been on that junk mail as well as any high gloss pieces, because those don't break down as easily. Microbes don't really enjoy them too much. Also, in the end, with the good compost, you're not going to see very much resemblance of what these materials were to begin with. So if you have materials that aren't breaking down, like plastics or those high gloss material, it's kind of going to show what your inputs were here. So yeah, I'm almost there, down to the bottom section. This pile's still got a ton of heat down here. Most of the pile's cooking very well. But as you go back and forth, everything is really getting a good mixing. Everything's really getting a chance to be in a different spot each time. Just take a little bit more here and all that good for hot center move to the bottom. Just a little in there, add a little more moisture. All right, I'm gonna add a little more moisture. Now what I'm going to do is create a bowl at the bottom here. Call it my hot pot. So give a little more surface area to that top that I'm about to move into here. More contact with this hot center. So here we go. Top goes into the middle. And again, just take a note along the way of what your moisture looks like. Squeeze every now and then just to verify what you're thinking. Now it's looking like it needs some more moisture to me. Pile's been getting so hot I've had to turn it every day for the past 3 days. Eventually that high nitrogen component will burn off. Temperatures will start coming down. And the pile will begin to stabilize. Again, you don't want to soak this stuff. Misting is best. Layering it all in there. Take your time. No rush. The best you can do. Spread these materials around. Don't be afraid to get out there and do it. It's a fun process. Got a lot of goals for this compost. Really want to break up the compaction in my soil here, under my grass. Over the past 3 years, it's just kind of been getting a little more difficult to grow some good grass. My infiltration, the water seepage into the ground is very poor. This was a new build house. They did quite a bit of compaction around, and then just laid some sod on top of the clay. So I've got some work to do. Get all these microorganisms, building structure in the soil. Takes a little time, but in the end it's worth it. to lower my water consumption. No need for any fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. All natural. So we're almost done with the top part. This last little bit here. Good moisture in these last scoops, sitting on the bottom here. So again, just gonna spread her out. You notice I've got these really large holes in the cage, so things tend to fall out when you push them towards the edge. So try to get everything clumped up and moved over as a unit. These large holes allow me to reach my hand in and take moisture checks throughout the day. If you don't have these big openings in your cage, you can always cut one in. Just make sure you protect any sharp metal pieces that may be protruding. Don't need you getting hurt in the process. All right, so moisture looks good. We'll do a little squeeze test. Yeah, we're getting some good clumping. Still a lot of moisture in the materials. I'll just give it a light misting, and then we'll start adding the bottom onto our new top. As you can see, there's still a lot of steam coming out, or hopefully you can see that from your angle. These wood chips I selected have a lot of size variation, from small to stick size and everything in between. You see fungi growing on your wood chips. Definitely get those added to your pile. But once you get your pile put together for the first time, you're not going to want to add any more starting materials that aren't sterile. You want to make sure everything is cooked properly. So create a good recipe, stick to it. There's always things you can do later to improve your microbial populations. Looks pretty good, but since I'm here, and this is my 4th turn, I'm gonna add a little moisture in. and some bugs finding the pile. They're not going to be so happy once they get covered up here. They'll start moving their way to the edge and out of the pile. It was too hot for them. But in the end, all these bugs are going to be beneficial. Everything plays a role. Whether it's building structure in the pile, nutrient cycling, or being consumed by something else. Again, this heat's going to take care of any pests, pathogens, weed seeds. So just let it do its work. Steamy. Keep layering in some moisture here. Whoa. This tarp out of the way for now. Got this big chunk of bark. Was solid when I put it in there. It's starting to get some activity going on. Starting to get kind of mushy, which is very good. It's going to be a great feeding source for the fungi. Putting it right in the hot center there. All these microorganisms are being assessed under a microscope. From time to time, I'll take a sample, bring it inside, see what my numbers look like. Make sure we're heading in the right direction. Microbes tell a story. Learning how to interpret them is key to the success of your compost. Rebuilding your soil. Maintaining your soil. Increasing your yields. Make sure Mother Nature's doing her thing. Pretty amazing to get some of this under the microscope and see what's there. Gives you a new understanding for life. The structure that these microbes build in the soil helps retain water. So once you get good structure going on, it'll actually hold water throughout the summertime, really limiting the amount of water you need to apply, if any. Also, all the nutrients that are being created are being held within that structure. Nothing's leaching out. The plant has everything it needs to feed itself when it's ready. Down here we're getting a little bit of actinobacteria. Which I used to think was a bad thing. But it's actually a key component of decomposition. Under the microscope, if you're new to it, it might fool you to thinking that it's fungi. But it has some distinct characteristics that differentiate it from fungi. So it just takes practice. I built a pile back in March on my birthday. It's sitting right over there. Threw that under the microscope the other day. It's got all the soil food web members present. It's very active. Waiting for my soil pH kit to come in. I'm gonna do some tests for pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Check out my fungal to bacterial biomass. If all looks good, I'm going to start doing some treatment on some house plants. And to do that, I'll just take a couple handfuls of soil, put it into a mesh bag. Get some water out of this hose here because it's got a filter on it. It takes out all the chlorine and chloramine from the tap water. Fill up that bucket, put my mesh screen full of the compost in there, and just massage it. Rinse it through, extract all the organisms that are in that compost into the water. And then I will use that water mixture to feed to the plants. The compost that was in the bag, I'll then add it back to the compost pile to let it re-inoculate. And continue to break down. Towards the end here, moisture's looking decent all the way through. Again, just adding that little touch of moisture as we go when we see fit. Definitely looking a lot drier towards the bottom here. Got all the airflow coming from the bottom of the pallet. Overall, it's looking really good though. It's a pretty good workout too. Really don't mind being out here turning the compost. Almost there. I'm just going to collect all the material that's on the pallet. Whatever's fallen off, we'll just leave. We don't know what's getting mixed in once it hits the ground. Again, we want to ensure everything goes through that heating process properly. So if it's on the ground, we don't know if it's been through it or not. Best just to leave it. It's also critical you break up any of these clumps you're going through. And able to sift most of them out with my pitchfork here, but every once in a while you got some clumps that just don't want to come apart. So don't be afraid to get your hands in there and separate those pieces from each other. More moisture. Should be good on our moisture. Found that hardware screen works really well to cover up these holes in the pallet. Keeps most of the material on the pallet without falling through. It's also pretty easy to scrape up once you're done. In the past I used chicken wire. It's really just more of a pain than it needs to be. Little bits here. My shovel to get the last little bit here, because we'll get as much as we can into the pile. That's it. Spread this out. Make sure we got it all uniform. So ensure that temperatures stay consistent. Add a little bit more moisture all the way around. Now I'm going to grab my thermometers, put those into place. 3 of them here. Do a little measurement across. Attempt to find the middle. Get as close as you can to the middle with each probe. Right now this one's showing 83 and climbing. Again, just laying this across, attempting to find the middle, taking the measurement with your fingers, trying to stay on the same plane. This one's showing 80 degrees and steadily climbing. This one showing 68 degrees right now. This is going to go directly down the middle. So we're going to find the middle there. It's already up to 80 now. It's climbing fast. Get you a little peek over here. So this one's already up to 120. See, this one's just climbing. Just put that one in. This one's been in for a second. Kind of hard to see, but just about 120 on this probe. All's looking good. Moisture content looks good. Pile's layered very nicely. Now we wait. I'll check this throughout the day. Make sure everything is going good. Get some documentation and come and do it again. Thanks for joining me.